Hello and thanks for joining us again. This week's topic is manding, which is just another term for requesting. An important part of requesting is motivation. To request for something, you need motivation for it and to want it. Like we've discussed before, motivation for items, activities, people and places can change across the day. For example, if they've just had something, then they may be less likely to want it immediately after just having it. Or if they haven't had something for a while, then it may be more desirable. We also need to keep an eye out for the little cues that our learners give to show that they're interested in something before we prompt them to request for it. These cues could be behaviours like reaching out for something, pointing, or even just looking at something, but you know your learners well, so you'll pick up on these anyway. When we see these cues, our learner is showing motivation for something, and this is when we should prompt our learner to mand using their communication method. Another important thing to bear in mind is that we tread a fine line between wanting our learners to be independent and wanting to increase their requesting repertoire. If our main focus at this point is to develop communication, we could hide or put items out of reach so that our learners have to request from us to get their wants and needs met. As great as it is for them to be able to make their own cereal, if you're out of milk one day and they have no way of expressing that this is what they want, then this could result in a lot of frustration and challenging behaviour as they don't get their needs met. We will show you an effective way to prompt our learners to request for things that they want or need for each communication method. But first, let's talk about the different communication methods.
For some of our children, they find communicating effectively really difficult. Now, we can communicate in many different ways. So for some of our children, they engage in challenging behaviour to try and kind of express their wants and needs. It's important we teach them an appropriate way to communicate. As Nick mentioned, this week we're looking at manding or requesting. So for some of our children, they might be able to say some words, but they don't have functional speech. Now, what this means is they might be able to label things in their environment. They see a ball when they say ball, but actually they can't ask you for a drink when they're thirsty, or they can't ask you for the ball when they want to play with the ball. And for some of our children, they haven't started making babbling sounds yet. So we need to teach them an alternative way to communicate for now. So this could be by using sign language or a picture communication method, such as a communication book or an iPad. So we're going to look at each one of these different methods in a little bit more detail. When deciding on what's going to be the most appropriate form of communication for your learner, there's a number of things we need to take into consideration. Now, the first thing we need to do is look at whether they have the prerequisite skills they need to use this form of communication effectively. Now, the first method we're going to speak about is speech. Your child needs to have echolalia, which means they need to be able to imitate back sounds and words in order for you to be able to prompt them to request for the things they want and need. Now, there's many stages to speech development. So to begin with, we're just going to prompt one-word requests. So if your child wants juice, we're just going to prompt the word juice. Alongside this mand training, we're also going to be working lots on their listener skills and increasing their understanding of language. Now, once they have many things that they can ask for using a one-word request, and once they have increased understanding, then we might move on to two-word requests. And we're gradually going to build this up, but only once they do have understanding of more complex concepts. Now, your child might actually start by just making babbling sounds. And then they might start making word approximations. So actually it's not quite intelligible yet, but there's, some sounds in there of the word. And some of their speech might be intelligible, but they might be missing a few syllables. Or it could be adult form, so it's completely clear. In order to use just speech alone, your child needs to have intelligible speech in order to be understood by those around them. Now, if they're making babbling sounds or they're making word approximations, then what we can do is we can teach them sign alongside their speech. So we'll be encouraging speech and using sign as well so that they're understood by everyone around them. If your learner is making some speech but it's not intelligible, or maybe they're not making any speech yet, then we need to give them an alternative method to communicate. Now, there's many different methods of communication, and one of these alternative methods is using sign language. At Treetops, we use sign along. Now, similar to what we just spoke about, it's really important that when we first begin teaching, we're just going to prompt one part signs. So if your learner's outside and they want the ball, just prompt ball. And again, we're going to be working lots on increasing their listener skills and their understanding. Now, once they can ask for many things using a one-part sign, then we might start working on two-part signs and so on and so forth. And it might be as their understanding increases, then we start working on requesting for things such as information. So maybe they can't find the ball and then we teach them, where's the ball? But again, just remember to begin with, we're just going to start off with those one-part signs. It's really important that we're constantly pairing the language. So when you're prompting the sign ball, say ball. When you're delivering the ball, again, say the word ball. Now, for some of our learners, they really struggle to form the signs correctly, and they might have poor fine motor skills, in which case sign language might not be the best method of communication for these individuals. And actually, maybe we need to look at things like maybe picture communication or iPad communication. Here's an example of a picture communication book that we use at Treetops. So we have a ring binder folder, and then inside we have photographs of their favourite things that they might want to request for. And these are across multiple pages. Now the photographs have Velcro on the back, and this is so that we can move the position of the pictures. So we want the learner to actually learn to recognise the individual pictures and not rote learn to go to a certain area on the page. Now, this learner's working on an array of 4 pictures, but you might be working with someone that can scan larger arrays, in which case you might have a communication book which has an array of 6 pictures. And again, they have multiple pages. Now, to begin with, you might need to have the page open so that they're able to see the picture when they begin to request. So you have the phone, and then they might point to the phone. Now, once they're doing this reliably with the picture open, then you might want to move the picture and put it onto the next page. And then we want to teach our learner to turn the pages to find the item that they want. And we also want to teach them to sometimes have the book closed so they know to open the book and then flick through the pages to find the item. Now, for some of our learners, they might struggle to be able to have the motor skills to point, and we might actually teach them to do an exchange instead, where they take the picture and they hand it to you. Another alternative form of communication is the iPad. Now, our learner needs to have some prerequisite skills first. So we teach using the picture communication book to begin with. So that way our learner learns to point to pictures to communicate, scan larger arrays and turn the pages. They also need some prerequisite skills to be able to use the iPad. So they need to be able to scroll and they need to be able to touch the icons. Now, when we're teaching requesting using the iPad, we may have several different folders, and inside these folders, pictures of all the things that they may want to request for. We could also have pictures of things like the toilet for them to be able to ask to go to the toilet, or maybe pictures of people so they can ask for attention. So you might have pictures of yourself or your husband or their siblings. Now, to use this form of communication, what we're going to do is prompt our learners to scroll, find the folder of the things they want, and then point to the picture of the item that they may desire.
Right, snaps.
And the iPad has a vocal output as well. Now, we've spoken about a few different methods of communication, but there are many more. So, for example, if your child can spell and type, there's iPad software where they can type to request for things. Now, when deciding on what's the most appropriate method of communication, every individual is going to be different, and there's pros and cons for all of the different methods. So signing's great because your hands are always there, so you're never going to leave it behind like a book, or it won't run out of charge like an iPad. But actually, sometimes signing can be really hard, and it might limit the amount of things you can ask for, for which case then a book or an iPad would be great. And again, a book, if you can start asking for lots of things, the books are going to start getting really thick, whereas an iPad's just one small device and you can carry that around quite discreetly. So let's go to Rihanna now, and she's going to show us some of the teaching procedures to be able to teach some of these different methods of communication.
Danny has introduced you to the various forms of communication that we could use to teach our learners, dependent on their skill set. Now, let's look at the various methods to promote and teach independent requests. The basic principles will be the same regardless of the communication method, but the prompts may look slightly different. The first important aspect in teaching our learners to request for anything they may want or need is to contrive and confirm motivation. If we're not motivated to gain access to something, then there's going to be no point in us asking for it. For example, I wouldn't call up and order a Chinese takeaway if I wasn't motivated to have it for dinner. One strategy that you could use at home to teach these requests is to keep an eye out for all of those natural opportunities in which your learner wants to gain access to something, and then you're going to use this opportunity to teach. For example, your learner may go to the fridge, indicating to you that they want a snack. At this point, you may have to play detective to figure out exactly what it is that they want. But once you figure this out and you know where their motivation lies, you can then prompt the request for whatever it may be. It can be really tricky, but try to avoid asking any questions such as, "What do you want?" because otherwise your learner may become reliant on this and not be able to independently request without you having first asked this question. As Nicola mentioned earlier, another important point to bear in mind is that if your learner can access everything for themselves, then there's going to be no point in them asking for things. So be mindful of where you store the items or activities that you want to teach your learner how to ask for. The second important aspect is prompting. We've already discussed this in previous videos, but just to recap the basics. Prompts can include full physical, partial physical, or gestural for a learner who may use sign or a communication device, or they can be vocal for a learner who uses their voice to request. Prompts are really important in helping our learners to acquire new skills without becoming frustrated, but it is crucial that we try to fade them as quickly as possible so that they don't become reliant on these. We can fade our prompts by being mindful of not always going in with the most intrusive, like a full physical prompt. We're going to wait a few seconds to allow our learners to be independent. If they aren't, then we can go in with the smallest possible prompt to ensure that they can request for whatever it may be. Another way to help avoid prompt dependency is to deliver more reinforcement the more independent a request is. For example, my learner wants to ask for crisps and I've had to gesturally prompt the sign. So I'm just going to give them a few crisps in a bowl. But next time, they request independently without me having to prompt at all. So I give them the whole bag with lots of social praise. This way, they're going to learn that being more independent is going to get them bigger and better things, and it's more worthwhile than just relying on our prompts. Let's see what this looks like with some various methods of communication. So I can tell that my learner is hungry and motivated for a snack because he's come to the cupboard where we keep our food. At this point, I'm not sure exactly what it is he wants, so I'm just going to check that now. I'll hold up a couple of options to see which one he may want. Crisps, so he quite reliably indicated he wants the crisp. So at this point, I'm going to hold them up and see if we can request without any additional prompts. Nope, so he still just points and indicates that he wants the crisps. He's a sign learner, so I'm going to go with my least intrusive prompt at this point, which is using a gesture. He doesn't imitate, so I'm going to go with a tiny partial prompt and see if it will help. Crisps, yeah, that's it. Because I've had to provide a bit of a prompt, I'm just going to give him a couple of crisps in the bowl. Go on, enjoy. Hopefully, as I've only given him a few, he'll still be motivated to come back for more, and then he may be able to request for them more independently this time around. So let's pretend I know for sure that it is the crisp he wants again. I'll hold them up. And he signs crisps, so I'm going to give him the whole bag. That way he'll be more motivated and independent in his responses in the future. So this time my learner's indicating that he wants coffee. Let's pretend I know for sure, and this time he's a vocal learner. So I'm going to vocally prompt coffee.
Coffee.
Coffee, yeah, okay. So again, I'm just going to give him a small amount because I've had to prompt. There you go, coffee.
Coffee.
Coffee, yeah, of course. So he asked independently this time. I'm going to pour him a nice big mug of coffee to motivate him to be independent in the future. After many trials of this, and it does take a lot of teaching, he may be able to independently ask for coffee without having seen the coffee, because even that is a prompt in itself. So I can tell that my learner is reaching for his phone, but it is out of reach. So I can use this opportunity to teach him how to request for it appropriately. He uses a communication folder and pictures in this instance. So to start off with, I'm going to give him a couple of seconds to see if he'll respond independently. No, nothing. I'm going to gesturally prompt to his folder to remind him to use it. He opens the folder, which is great. If not, I'd open it with a partial physical prompt. Now I can see if he'll select the right picture. Again, he doesn't respond, so I'm going to go in with a gestural prompt. Yeah, fine, good. There you go. Just like in the sign and vocal examples, I may just give him the phone for a few minutes before trying again and seeing if he can respond more independently this time. So when we're teaching communication, requests can be for anything a person wants or needs. So this doesn't just have to be items or activities, it can also be for attention. And we can teach that for specific people so that our learners can ask for mum or ask for dad or a certain friend. Here's an example of what that may look like. So I'm reading my book and my learner indicates that he wants my attention. This is a bit tricky because you want to make sure to avoid any kind of eye contact or give them attention before the request has been made. So I'm going to gesturally prompt to the iPad to remind him to use this to communicate. He doesn't select the correct picture, so now I'm going to gesture to the correct picture for him.
Brianna.
Yeah, hi, you right? So that's how it would work. And just like all the other examples, I may provide him a little bit of attention and then run another trial to see if he can be more independent in his request.
So for this week's session, we've looked at requesting, aka manding. We have discussed the various types of communication methods that our learners can use and how to teach our learners to request for items, activities, places, etc. independently. It is important to remember that being able to effectively and independently ask for things we want is an extremely important skill to acquire. As stated earlier, it is based on our learners' motivation for various items that they may want throughout their day. It is teaching our learners to appropriately communicate their wants and needs to the people around them, instead of inappropriately requesting for these items using challenging behaviour such as whining or crying, etc. Remember to look for cues throughout the day that our learner is motivated for and wants items, activities, people or places. This also gives us opportunities to teach requests to our learners. We want to look for and contrive multiple opportunities throughout the day to teach our learners how to independently communicate what they desire. When teaching our learners to ask for things, it is important to teach them to request for specific items. For example, if our learner wants crisps as a snack, then we would teach the request for crisps, instead of a more generic request like more, please, or snack. By teaching these specific requests, our learners are able to express exactly what they want or need. When our learners are able to express their wants and needs, they will be able to independently and effectively communicate with those around them. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.